Greetings, I'm Dr. Mike Whitman, Director of the KSU Center for Information Security Education, also Director and Chair of the Southeast Collegiate Cyber Defense Competition. I'd like to take this opportunity to congratulate you on your success in completing the preliminary. Overall, I think the preliminaries went well. However, you've got a different challenge ahead of you as you will be tasked differently and challenged differently when you move into the on-site cyber defense competition. I'd like to take this opportunity to give you an overview of what to expect on the on-site competition, especially for those of you who've never been to one before. I will go over some of the conduct of the competition and some of the rules that you need to keep in mind while you're here. Once again, if you're watching this, you've already completed the preliminary, and now you're ready for phase 2 of the regional competition. The winner of the regional competition will go on to the national competition held annually in April in San Antonio. We are now down to 8 teams competing at the time of this recording. If somebody drops out, we'll have fewer. All of you will get to come to Kennesaw State University, Kennesaw, Georgia, which is north of Atlanta. I've actually got directions here shortly that I will share with you. You will all be working out of the Ann and John Clendenin building. You'll each be assigned a separate classroom and provided with a separate computer network segment as part of the competition. To get you familiar with some of the terminology that we use in the competition and in this presentation, there are 3 members of what we refer to as the gold team. We run the event. Our word is beyond question. Don't argue with the gold team. We can easily assess penalties and disqualify individuals if we detect that you are not operating within the parameters of the competition or if you're causing some sort of disruption to the competition. That's myself, it's Dr. Mike Whitman, it's my 2 colleagues, Dr. Herb Mattard and Professor Andy Green. During the competition, we'll be easily distinguishable. We'll have gold polo shirts on with the SECCDC logo. We'll also be wearing gold lanyards with our name badges. Everyone affiliated with the competition will have name badges on. The white teams are the judges. During the regional or the preliminary competition, you had a local IT person helping out your organization. Now you're going to have an independent individual who will rotate through the team rooms. You won't have the same judge for more than about 2 hours. This allows us to do a couple of things. It makes sure that we don't end up with one judge unequally assessing one team for the duration of the competition. While we train our judges up, they are, as you probably know, all volunteers. So as they will actually rotate through the competition, and it kind of levels the playing field. So they will typically have a white lanyard and a white identified judging name badge. We give them white polo shirts, but they all choose to wear them. We've also got a red team. The red team's the bad guys. They're a penetration test team, a series of world-class professional penetration testing teams. So I'll wager it's not if you're going to get hacked, it's when. In some cases, these are professional military cyber warfare specialists, so they really know what they're doing. Although we do throttle them back so that once they're successful, they give you the opportunity to recover from the attacks. We want to know not only how good you are at defending against these attacks, but what you do once you get attacked. And that's one of the things that we really need to work on in this year's competition. I've got a group of individuals who will be helping me. They're referred to as the black team. They'll have black polo shirts. They're our tech support people. Typically, you will not have a tech support person enter your competition room unless they are escorted by a gold team member. We may bring them in, drop them off, and move to another problem, depending on what technical issues you're having. For the most part, when we turn over the computers and the computer networks to you, you are from that point forward responsible for their operation. You are tech support to the point to where you cannot open up a computer. If it's a software issue, if it's a networking issue, if it's an application issue, you solve it. If it's a hardware issue, we'll typically bring you in replacement hardware, and then you're responsible for getting that hardware back up and running. In the rare occasion that there's something that we need to tweak or adjust, we'll bring in a black team member. Say, for example, you fragged a system to the point to where it just doesn't work anymore and you need a reset. So at that point in time, we'd bring in a black team member to reset your client or server, and then you'd be responsible for getting it back up and running to that point. Needless to say, good backup and recovery programs are a must for this competition. You are the blue teams. You'll have blue lanyards and name badges. Name badges must be worn at all times during the competition, and as such, your primary goal is to win the competition. What are you doing during this competition? Well, basically, you're doing similar things that you did during the prelim. Your general role is to inherit this network segment that has been misconfigured and malconfigured by the previous team. You got to get it configured, updated, and patched according to the expectations of your headquarters. During the entire event, we've got two scenarios that were two domains that we work within. One, we all know we're part of a student competition. That's the operations domain, also known as the admin domain. The other one is the HAL domain. HAL stands for Hierarchical Access Limited, the case organization we use as the backbone for the competition. Whenever you have a HAL question, you talk to the CISO. In other words, you want to know about the applications, you want to know about what you're expected to do with an injection, you have a question, anything to do within the scenario of the competition, then you talk to the CISO, and I'll tell you how you can get a hold of the CISO during the competition here in a second. If you have a question about the rules or the competition itself, you talk to your room judge. There will always be a room judge in there during the competition. And if they don't know the question, they will forward it up the chain, and then that person will ask me or another member of the gold team. You're getting graded on 3 tasks. That's protecting the network segment from red teams, and I want to emphasize, and handling incident response from red team successes. Now there's 2 kinds of red team successes here. One is live incident response or live defense, and that's when you've actually got somebody trying to hack into your network. The other one is passive incidents, and that's if, for example, you are working at an office and you discover that an employee has installed something on their system they should not have. That's a policy violation. We also treat that as an incident. You are expected to respond to that incident just as if you detected a hacker trying to get into your system. And that's one of the things that teams inevitably do poorly during this competition. You find something, you fix it and you move on. Well, in this competition, you can't simply do that. You have to let us know that it was an issue so that in the scenario of the corporation, we can find that individual and hold them responsible for their bad behavior. And if you, as you move into the professional world, if you're not there already, you'll find out it's the same way. You don't just cover up somebody else's mistakes and move on. And you're also as you did during the preliminary, you'll constantly receive some requests from, in this case, the CISO. During the prelim, it was the CIO. Now it's going to be the CISO. Will send you memorandums from a dedicated email address. Not the email address you actually email them if you have a question. That will be hal.ciso@seccdc13, and we will give you all the emails and a refresher of this when you show up on site. But you communicate questions to the HAL CISO over the HAL CISO email. You receive and respond to tasks, work, injections, business change requests from a new account where we're calling injection at seccdc13 to try and really reinforce that that's where your work comes from. Always respond to a work request using the reply to function. And in this case, it may be a reply to all, because we're going to have your system set up so that your room judge, who actually grades your assignment, will get copies of everything coming to you and from you. All right, and the last thing you're going to be expected to do is we're going to give you a set of services that are marginally green, which means they're up and working, sort of. Your job is to keep them green, and to forward to that goal, you'll be given 4 hours to get everything updated, configured, and patched. That way you don't lose points having to do reboots and resets and services up and services down, trying to get everything perfectly configured. That includes the firewall. So each of those three categories, red team assessments, and the red teams assess you by taking points off of a 2,000 point score every time they're able to successfully attack you. Now you're able to mitigate some of that attack through good incident response procedures, and I'll go a little bit over that additionally here in just a second. So 3,000 points for red team's assessment, 2,000 points for red team assessment, 2,000 points for taskings, 2,000 points estimated as a percentage of uptime for service availability. We actually measure what percentage of uptime you're able to hold during the competition. The schedule for the competition: you'll come to KSU. Most teams tend to drive up Tuesday morning. That cuts down on the hotel's cost. We kick off, we ask all teams to check in sometime between 11 and 11:30. By 11:30, you need to be seated in room Science 109, and we'll have diagrams and signs and everything else to help get you into the right location. Our judges go to a different room and they get a different briefing. We'll give you an overview briefing, much like the one you're receiving right now, telling you what's going to happen that day, any changes or updates, anything we want everybody to be aware of, things like that. The competition will officially start. We'll have the judges come and pick up the team so that you know what your team is, team number, what your room you're going to be working out of is. They will escort you to the room. You'll stand out in the hall. We'll come down, open all the doors, and have a shotgun start. We'll say ready, set, go. You go into the room. You start the competition. Day one ends at 8 p.m. So it's 8 hours on day one, 8 hours on day two, and about 5 or 6 on day three. We'll get you some snacks in the middle of the afternoon, and there will be a box lunch at around 5 p.m. Guess that would technically be a box dinner. On day two, which is on Wednesday, now you're gonna meet at 8:45 in SC 109. Everybody needs to be in, seated, and ready to go. We'll give you last minute instructions for the day, touch on any bases we need to address. Judges will come get you again, take you to your rooms. Then we'll start the competition at 9 a.m. sharp, goes through 5 p.m., lunch and an afternoon snack. The last day, a little different. We start same way, 8:45 and 109, 9 o'clock competition starts. At 2 o'clock, the competition's over. Now, we'll run the competition right up until 2. Teams tend to get a little complacent there in the afternoon between like 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. thinking, okay, the competition's over. When in reality, the competition runs all the way up until 2. You could get hit with the red team, you could get new business taxings, and we are constantly monitoring your service availability. At 2 o'clock, competition stops. You move into a reception area. Now we have a lunch sometime around 11:30, but there's a reception with light snacks in an open area where we have a recruiting meeting, where some of the sponsors want to meet you and they have jobs in information security they're looking to fill. Predominantly among them is Deloitte, this year being a big sponsor. DHS usually has some people up here looking for people for their cyber warfare operations, plus a handful of local organizations, all of which are looking for qualified and talented people in information security. That you get 2 hours of snack and meet and greet and that sort of stuff. We'll also invite the red team to come up and share some of their perceptions with you. But at 4 o'clock is the award ceremony. You'll have a little presentation where your group gets up, introduces themselves, and talks about your experiences briefly. You got about 5 minutes per group. And then we do the presentations of the gold team, white team, and red team, and then we hand out the trophies. Quick update on some critical rules. Everyone should have downloaded and read the new rules. We've got a minor update on some of the rules here. So go to www.seccdc13.org, click on the rules tab, go down to the bottom, click on that, and here's where we keep the latest copy of the rules. So make sure that you go there, download those, and read through them. There's only a few minor changes, but we always try to refresh them before each competition to make sure everybody's familiar with them. There will always be a copy of the rules in the room, usually held by the judge, if you want to read through them during the competition. Make sure that you only have your 8 primary competitors in the room. While most teams want to bring a single alternate, we recommend your team does not bring more than one alternate. One alternate we can put on our runners and volunteers staff and feed them. Anything more than that, there's a chance we don't have food for them, because the money for this competition is extremely tight, because we cannot use DHS money for food anymore. Your team should have a clearly identified team captain and a team co-captain, and those individuals will actually be identified on their name badges and will be responsible for serving as a liaison with the white team, and then the white team talks to us. Once the competition starts, your coach slash sponsor slash institutional representative will disappear. We've got a room we're going to shove them in, lock them up. They can't come out. They cannot coach you during the competition. A lot of the teams, their first reaction is at the end of the day have a sit down with your coach and talk about what happened, what worked and what didn't. No, technically that's against rules. If someone overheard such a session, the team could be disqualified, and we don't want to do that. What we want is the team to come in. It's like a final exam. You've done all your studying. Now it's time to show us what you know. You don't get up and walk out in the middle of it and phone a friend. You don't go talk to your coach and halfway through it. You do the best you can. Okay, so you're not allowed to talk to anybody, not just the team rep, once the competition starts, and that specifically includes the overnight hours for the multi-day competitions like the on-site. You can use pretty much anything that's freely available when searching your systems. We restrict you to open source and freeware utilities. However, within the domain of your, as I was saying, you can examine your own subnet with your own tools. However, if at any point in time we discover you're expanding your search to other networks, it doesn't take rocket science to realize if you're Team 5 and you're on subnet 192.168.5.x, that maybe the other teams are .4, .3, .2, etc. You scan outside your network, that's grounds for disqualification. Within your network segment, as long as you're careful about what you're scanning, it's yours to configure, it's yours to assess, it's yours to fix. So keep that in mind. No offensive activity. That's not the purpose of this competition. It's a purely defensive competition. We want to know how you would work in a traditional business organization. They don't go out and, Coke doesn't go out and scan Pepsi, or at least they shouldn't, on a daily basis. They examine their systems, make sure their system's up and running. So all of your team members will have their badges on, and we control access to your rooms. That doesn't necessarily mean that for the purposes of the competitions, the rooms are to be considered secure. We'll tell you what's secure and what's not. Internet usage is by proxy server. We ask that you, the teams, send a list of up to 20 sites, and that's root domain. So for example, if you wanted access to the sourceforge.net, a particular application on there, you wouldn't have to ask for 20 different direct links to different applications on SourceForge. You'd say various security tools located on sourceforge.net. Now listen carefully. You need to list the URL, the application you want from that URL or applications, and then a business reason for the request. I'm going to pause this and make sure that I create a slide here to emphasize that. So it'll look like this. You'll have your 20 items numbered. You'll say, number one, I want access to this URL like sourceforge.net. You'll say, on that website, there are 3 or 4 security tools such as, and you list what you want. And then you give us a business reason for that, not because I want that tool. Why do you need that tool? What's the purpose of that tool? Why do you want that information? Once you get that all wrapped up, you need to email that to infosec@kennesaw.edu. Have your institutional representative or coach or sponsor email it to that address labeled White Team List for Team Kennesaw State University. We will then review those, and we do not guarantee that all 20 of yours will be added. Sometimes we accept some and don't accept others just to force you to have to go through the process of the on-site additions. We will guarantee that any operating system that we give you as part of the competition, we will have their sites added to the proxy so that you can get updates and patches. Beyond that, we just guarantee access to like the SECCDC13 email server and things that we know that you're going to need access to. Once again, I need that by February 21st, not the 22nd. After the 21st at midnight, once the competition starts, you can send a memorandum to the CISO asking for new sites to be added to the proxy. It typically takes 1 to 2 hours to get that site on there, unless it was one that we should have already had on there because it's germane to one of the operating systems that we're using. Okay, so once the competition started, properly formatted request to the CISO, we're changing that slightly this year, and it's 30 minutes to 2 hours is usually what happens. We monitor all internet activity. Some of it is the white team judge sitting in the room looking over your shoulder. Some of it is the fact that we log all traffic, and if at any point in time we find out that you figured out a loophole to get access to something that you should not have access to, it could be a penalty, it could be a disqualification. So let's keep everything square, tight, and above board. Like I said, we log the entire competition. We run a logging server for the entire competition. Upon written request, and I'm not talking about email, if we receive a letter requesting a team's logs, we may or may not be able to provide that. Typically, if we get a legitimate request for your logs, we'll go through and do a search based on IP and put together a logs. However, the team bears the cost of producing those logs, and so if it takes us a dozen blank DVDs, somebody's got to cover that cost, as well as shipping and everything else. So we also periodically receive a request from a nonprofit research organization, somebody like Symantec, well, not Symantec because they're for profit. Another university wants to do studies of intrusion detection, and they want to look at some traffic. We validate that they are in fact a nonprofit research organization, and we may provide them with that information. Usually it's referred to us by the nationals. So DHS does it from time to time as well, which means do not put anything into the system that you don't want logged and potentially viewed by others, which is one reason why we tell you you shouldn't be accessing any website that requires login credentials, because of the fact that those credentials are then logged and shared. We typically destroy all logs and all documents associated with the competition within 60 days of the conclusion. If there's a protest during the competition, if you received a penalty, if you have a problem, you have to submit a request in writing to your white team member, and they will then refer it to the gold team, who will review it and get your response. Usually we'll come and ask you a few questions in person, and then we'll write up a response. If we issue your team a penalty, you also always have the choice of refuting the penalty. However, we are the people who make the final designation on and decision on penalties. So once the competition is over, the scores are final, and short of a blatant discovery of cheating or hacking by any one team, our decisions are final. All of the materials associated with the competition, including those you produced during the competition, are the property of the competition, which means you cannot take injections home. You cannot take a hard copy or electronic copy of anything associated with the competition home. Once you walk into the competition, you're permitted your 2 boxes of books and notebooks and checklists and such. You bring those into the room. They're going to stay in the room until the competition's over. You don't take them home every night. If you want to bring a single notepad of handwritten notes for team discussion outside the competition, you certainly can do that. We make sure that the judges know this, but they should enforce all documents remain in the competition area. Don't print anything out to try and take out. It has to be a notepad of handwritten notes. That's because some injections are used from year to year. And even though the bulk of the assignment is, can you do this in the constraints given, we want to make sure that we try to preserve the integrity of the competition. It's much like a lot of instructors won't let you take the exams home if you take a multiple choice test, for example. So everything stays here. At the end of the competition, you can take your books, papers and such out. Everything about the competition has to stay here. Make sure you refer to the team packet, which will be posted shortly, which has additional information about the competition. The injection email system we're going to use is similar to the one you used during the prelim. There's going to be a little bit of difference though. Before everything was by email, and most of you used a competition system to access it. We're going to do that again. However, this time we've got bad guys. Bad guys want to crash your network. They want to mess up your ability to operate. So as a backup, we give you a laptop that's on a physically different network. It runs on its own cable through its own switches and servers. You are responsible for monitoring that laptop. In fact, one of the things we have you do when you come in is make sure that's properly configured, set it up so that it has a chime whenever mail comes in. But you will be able to access the SECCDC13 email server over competition network. So you don't have to, if everything's running fine, you just keep an eye to make sure that nothing's coming in on the injection system that's not on your regular system. So that's your backup. There's no printer on the backup. However, you'll have thumb drives that you can use to move documents around. But that laptop is not a competition system in that you don't configure it or use it for anything else. You also can't use it for anything web related because it also goes through a proxy server that's even more restrictive than the one your competition systems are on. It only has access to a couple of websites that we use for competition assessment. Oops. Okay. Our primary means of communication will be just like during the prelims, by SECCDC13 email accounts. All your injections will come from one address. Your communications go to the CISO. The laptop is a backup. Hopefully, if you can keep your competition systems up and running, you'll be able to access the email server and everything will keep running. And if at any point in time you're unable to access the email server, you can always jump over on the backup laptop to make sure you're not missing injections. Just like during the prelim, we've got a competition flow or a communication flow for the on-site. You're the team. You'll receive your injections, your taskings from injection at SECCDC13. So those come to you. Where do you get your injections? From and respond to injection at SECCDC13. Now, one of the things that you'll do during your first task is set up your email account so that they automatically carbon copy the room judges. Okay, because they're the ones who are going to be grading your assignment, and if they don't get it, you don't get graded. So that's actually part of it, to set up a permanent carbon copy. And we give you a walkthrough assignment sheet, a lab manual, to kind of guide you through setting that up so that once you do it, you don't have to remember to carbon copy every single time. If you have questions about the in-game or um, operation of the HAL organization, you talk to the HAL CISO about those. You email him, he can respond. We'll actually have the ability to phone the CISO, but he really doesn't like to talk on the phone. If you send him 2 or 3 emails and he's not responding because he's probably busy with something else, you may want to pick up the phone and give him a call. Question about the rules or regulations of the competition, you talk to your judge. Your team captain, and only your team captain, should be the one talking to them, unless the team captain's not in the room, then in which case your co-captain does it. So, once again, the injection flow. You get an email from injection at SECCDC13 saying see attached for assignment. It'll have a communications number on it. That number will correspond to the memo you receive. It's almost always from the CISO. The very first one, the welcome email, will probably be from the CIO. You always should hit reply to send your work response. You do what they tell you to do in the letter. You write up your memo and response. You send that back to where you got it from. If you have questions, it goes to the HAL CISO. Please make sure you are using appropriate memo letterhead, fully filled out. One of the reasons that a lot of teams lost credit on the prelim was they started sending in memos that came from team XXXX, or the memo headers weren't filled out because you presumed that just because you hit reply and attached it that it would end up where it needs to be. What you need to imagine is that we've got this special application that's a document processing system that all of the executives send their work to, and then it gets parsed out to the team based on their availability and the suitability of their task, and then it scans the header to determine who that message is going to and then who it comes back from. That's what we're simulating with the competition. An automated document management system. You don't fill out the header, the to, the from, the subject, the date, the memo number you're responding to, then you're going to find out that stuff doesn't get graded and you lose credit for it. When you set up your email, like I said, it should automatically CC the room judge. If you find your room judge doesn't appear to be doing anything, you may ask them, are you getting our messages? And if they aren't, then it's up to you to fix it. You can't go back and fix what's happened in the past. You got to worry about it from going forward. If the emails from the 2 major sites are not to be spoofed, the injection and the CISO, they're out of bounds for the competition, the red team. And in fact, the entire SECCDC.server is out of bounds, but that doesn't mean they won't simulate it and try and spoof something. So but if you get it from injection, do it. Don't give us any grief over it. If it's from the CIO, you can imagine that he's sitting on the other end talking to you about it. Just like during the prelim, all your memos will be properly formatted. Here you can see we're changing the names of the executives in the competition to be more in line with the case we originally based it off of. Your CISO is Paul Alexander. Your CIO is Amanda Wilson. We'll give you more of this when you show up on site. You have to make sure that your headers are filled out correctly to get full credit. It will always be in this form. Your responses should always use this form. They should always include the memo number, and that's that number I've got circled here in red. Okay, 03 is the month, January, February, March. This is the second memorandum you would receive in the month of March. Your services are evaluated on percentage of uptime. We do a service assessment check against all of your services, and in most cases we have some sort of mechanism embedded in your systems that report whether or not the services are up. In some cases it's a service check where the injection engine or the service assessment engine goes out and looks at your web page, for example, and if it's able to pull up the HTML code that we're looking for, then you get credit for an uptime. We may provide you with access to a different system that shows pretty much the same thing. It depends on whether or not it's working that particular day. I mean, there's a lot of variables here. We typically try to give you some mechanism by which you can determine that your stuff is up and running. But that doesn't mean you can't look outside your firewall to see if your stuff is up and running. There's no reason you can't request an additional switch and then put it up outside your firewall, put a laptop on there, and check your own services time to time. That's what I mean by just because you see a service up internally doesn't mean that we do, because the number one problem we found there is usually firewall and router misconfigurations. We will give you a list of services and service accounts that you can't modify. Teams will inevitably say, well, what can we move operating systems? Can we move services? When we give you the system, you can do what you want, but if you mess it up to the point to where it's not reporting the services that on the ports, or I should say the sockets we expect to see them on, which is the address and port combinations, then you may not get credit for the services. So if you decide, I think what we're going to do is reformat the ESXi server and install everything on a single Linux server on the native iron and reload everything, hey, go for it. You're on the clock. You've only got 4 hours to do everything you need to do to update, patch, configure, and maintain those systems. In the meantime, we're going to be sending you business taskings to do on those systems, and if you want to maximize your points, you may want to reconsider the start over methodology. So like I said, we may give you a mechanism by which you can see what we see. Do what you want. Service downtimes after that first 4 hour period will incur penalties. So not only do you lose points against the percentage of uptime, if you have an hour of downtime in a row, we add a penalty. Typically 50 points for the first hour, 100 points for a 2 hour period, and these are not cumulative. So if you're down for an hour, you lose 50. If you're down for 2, you lose 100, not 150. But the idea is that it keeps getting bigger and bigger. It's one of those insult to injury type scenarios. You are responsible for everything past. There's a little bitty plastic box we'll show you when we bring you into the room that your networks plug into. There's usually a primary and a secondary cable that come out of that. The secondary cable is typically unplugged. In case the primary goes down, all we're going to do is swap out cables. You're responsible for that piece of network cable and everything on your side of it, but not the plastic box. You have to manage the ESX server, ESX, ESXi, whichever it actually ends up being. You have to manage the VM images. You will actually have 6 to 8 workstations, whether they're laptops or PCs, that you have to manage. They will actually be inbounds, and you're responsible for managing those, updating, patching, configuring those, as well as the servers and services. You have to manage your own backups and restorations. We typically give you external USB drives. You can do whatever you need to do to handle backups. During the competition, and if any point in time you've fouled up a system to the point where it is unfunctional and unrecoverable, you can always request a restart. There's a penalty, a points penalty involved, but it's better than simply admitting that your e-commerce site will never ever come back and you will never ever make any additional points off of it. Bad guys will show up anytime after 4 p.m. on day one. They may be active, they may be passive. They have their own strategies. Most hackers like to come in, collect a little information, slowly probe your system to see how your defenses are, and then they'll step on your neck. They will get into your system. I have yet to have a competition where a team was not penetrated by the red team. It's going to happen. It's how you happen that determines your score. They start off with those 2,000 points. They take points off for every successful penetration. We will add points back. Not all of them. It's typically you can earn 50% of your points lost back if you have good incident response procedures. You detected the attack, you documented it, you mitigated it, you wrote it up properly using the right forms, following the right procedures and policies, and you reported it to us in a timely manner. There's typically a 1 hour window, we call the golden hour, between the time a red team hits you, actually leaves you, and the time that we expect within which we expect the team to respond. So if you're able to respond quickly, effectively, you can earn some of the points back that you lose. And usually the teams with the best IRs usually have the best red team assessments. If you need to send something hard copy to the office, to operations, or to the CISO, if he asks you to print it out and send it to him, we'll have some shotgun envelopes. You take it to the judge and ask him to relay it to the operations, and he'll put it in an envelope, or she'll put it in an envelope and drop it in an outbox. We have runners come by and pick it up. If for some reason your email isn't working properly and you need to talk to the CISO, there'll be a VoIP phone in the room that we install as part of the competition. You can call the CISO's office. We are no longer responsible for the CISO, and actually he may be at the CIO's extension. If you pick up the phone, it may say CIO, but for the competition, it's actually the CISO. But if you call him and you're wasting his time, he may unload on you. So that's just between you and him. That's part of the game. What did we learn watching you during the prelims? And this is something that you should pay close attention to, because we'll look even harder at it in the on-site. Documentation is crucial. It could make or break your competition team during the competition. We were underwhelmed with the performance on change logs. That is one of our primary assessments in the competition, whereas in the prelim it was your service assessment. So teams that did great change logs got great scores on service assessment. Now it's being shifted to an injection score. The change control officer will ask periodically for your change logs, and he will grade them. So you need to make sure you're keeping detailed, timely notes on all your systems. And in fact, I'll give you a hint. As soon as a server is operational, you're happy with its updated, patched, configure, and working properly, you need to submit a change log to the company change officer. Copy that log, send it in, say here's the email server is now fully operational, here's the change log for it, let us know if you have any issues. That's going to be scored, and you'll be told about it on site. But I'm just giving you a heads up. So whoever is running those change logs, they need to do a better job of making sure that they're cohesive. It's one document. Even if you've got multiple tabs in the spreadsheet, everybody's working on a different tab, you reassemble those whenever you're expected to submit them. We also will have something new called a password log, which will actually be a composition notebook that you will be expected to store every username and every password on every system in that log. That log is considered secure, because what happens is after you leave for the day, we're going to sit down and try to log into your systems. If we can't, it's a penalty. If we can, it's not. We're also going to have a different set of policies, or I should say an updated set. They'll mostly be the same, but they'll probably be in a different format, be a different structure. You need to review the policies for the organization before you show up, because it's those policies that dictate how you operate and, hint, hint, how we evaluate you on site, especially the incident response policy and forms. You need to learn to report all incidents, whether it's active, like I said before, the red team's trying to get in, or passive, as in you discover something on a system that shouldn't be there. Okay? Read all of the memorandums carefully. Some memorandums may ask you to do more than one thing. Okay, so if you got something that says I want you to do A and B and C and D, you have to do all the pieces to get full credit for that assignment. Make sure you're using the right reply forms as well. When you are responding to a message, we had a big problem during the prelim when somebody would send in an incident response, a response to one of the incident injections. Here we're not going to have scenarios. You're going to have real world bad teams, red teams. We would get one email with the IR questions answered, and then 5 minutes later we'd get a different email with the form. We're not going to grade it like that. If we're going to grade the first thing we get, and that's it. We're not going to wait for you to send us the rest of the assignment. So try to do a little better job of managing your paperwork. This competition is just as much about project management as it is about system administration and security. For the on-site, you're going to have 2 to 3 times the number of injections you had during the preliminary, and I'm talking about during the same amount of time. You had 10 injections over 8 hours. You can expect more than that, plus red teams, plus systems and services. So you have to multitask effectively. You have to manage your time and manage your assignments. You'll be given whiteboards and markers so you can write everything down and track it, and all kinds of things that you need to do, but it's still up to you to manage the projects. Double check your submissions before you send them in. We kept getting draft submissions and then an email saying, oops, we sent you the wrong one. We're going to grade the first thing we get. On-site will require active services. I'm emphasizing that this is significantly different than the prelim. You know, you're going to be expected to keep 5 or 6 services up and running for 3 solid days. Red team's going to knock it down. We don't care that it got knocked down. We care how fast you get back up. Okay, so instead of scenarios, we're going to have red teams. Instead of configurations, you're going to have active services. Just as an aside, you'll get reminded with this on site, we'll have first aid kits in the room if you get a paper cut or what have you. If you need to use the first aid kit, just let the judge know so we can document all injuries and incidents in that regard. And if it's something major, we'll get your team sponsor, coach involved. We want you to have fun during the competition, but we want you to take it seriously. Okay, we tend to get a little crazy in the competition, get punch happy after a day and a half of this because we've been working on it for weeks and weeks beforehand. So we want you to have fun in the competition, but when you're working on the competition, we want you to be serious. We want you to be competitive, but keep it fair and within the rules. We will not allow you to have food and drink in the competition rooms, but we have break areas. And so if you just need a break, get up, make sure the team captain knows where you're going and when you'll be back. Go down the hall, take your break, walk around, stretch your legs, relax, stay hydrated, don't get overly stressed. It is, after all, just a student competition. If you have any questions or problems, have your team captain contact the judge. If they need to, they'll contact us. Once again, if you have any questions, make sure you have your team rep contact us at infosec@kennesaw.edu. Make sure you get those white team lists in by February the 21st, and we wish you the best of luck with the on-site competition.